Max speaking. It's early morning. We didn't get a lot of sleep because we had a nightmare. Um, but we're calmed down now. I wanted to talk about something. I wanted to talk about something that's been on our mind. So we used to be an atheist. We've been pretty upfront about that on our social medias, and a big part of why we're not anymore is tied to our personal experience of our disorder of DID, or dissociative identity disorder. And before we knew that we had DID, before we knew about it from the psychological perspective, our primary method of coping with, and still one of our primary methods of coping with and handling and dealing with our differences there, has been through a spiritual lens, because the medical lens before we were diagnosed, and frankly still after, has not been able to help us, has not been able to heal us, has not been able to do anything for us other than further push us away. And we were someone who was falsely treated for most of our life, who was falsely medicated for most of our life, who was taught various lies that we believed, that were incredibly detrimental and had long-term consequences on our health. And before we understood what DID was, we thought, and frankly still think, we were being visited by spirits. That's what made sense to us at the time. That's how we saw it, was there are all these spirits visiting me. That's when I was still seeing things through a singular lens, right? And now I understand, of course, through a psychological lens, that it wasn't exactly that these spirits were visiting me. It's a part of me visiting myself, kind of. And one of the first, I guess, we were aware of what was going on, was our one of our altars, who we know as a Grim Reaper and as a form of death, and an angel called Samael, who is also sort of like Jewish Satan. I'm not going to go into that, but this concept from trying to think how to put this. I might need to refilm this if I can't get this to be as concise as I want it to be. But this Grim Reaper was visiting me, and they were not visiting me as Samael at first. They were visiting me as a different form of death, called Azrael. And Azrael was one of the first forms of death that was visiting me. And then later as Samael. And at first we thought these things were visiting us. And that's how it felt at that time. And we were going through a period where we were having nightly panic attacks, physically painful, in our heart. Our heart was physically hurting us every night, to an extent where we truly believed we were dying. We genuinely thought every night, okay, this is going to be the last day of my life, and it was every day. And we now understand that that is PTSD, that what we were experiencing was severe PTSD that has since been diagnosed as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is connected to our experiences living as who was for a long time an undiagnosed autistic person, as well as a gender diverse person, who was not getting any of the care we needed at all, and who was incredibly suicidal for most of our life. And because of the pain of not being able to conform to a system that did not love us, did not want us, and treated us as disposable, and still treats us as disposable, and also being raised by a narcissist. But so when this angel started visiting me every night, by that point I was already practicing magic, but I wasn't labeled. And by that point, I was already seeing things through a spiritual lens as a means of coping with my disabilities, as a means or I honestly don't. I mean, I am disabled, and I understand that, and I accept that. But I actually prefer sort of to see it as my disabilities are sort of blessings and curses simultaneously, equally in equal measure. Is sort of how I see it, and I did not always see it that way. When I was still a slave to other people's mental models, I saw it that all my disabilities were just curses, because that's what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that there is no possible hope for you, and that you just have to take medicine forever and do whatever they tell you to do to conform. Essentially, that's what we believed. And death started visiting us, and a few months, maybe 4 to 5 months after death started visiting us, we were disowned. And at the time, it made sense to us that that was why death was visiting us, was because we were going to be disowned. In retrospect, we also think that they were a personification of the pain we were experiencing with our PTSD, to an extent, sort of, kind of. It's connected, we believe. And then, of course, much later, we were diagnosed with DID around when, well, actually, we were in denial, because officially we were diagnosed with DID the same day we were diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, but our dissociative amnesia literally blocked it from our memory that we were, because we were not ready to accept our DID yet. And we're still wanting to see it wholly through a spiritual lens, whereas now we see it through both the spiritual and psychological lens, both of which are useful to us as a means of coping with and explaining our existence. There was something we wanted to say, and I'm hoping this video doesn't get too long, because it's really, really hard for us to stay how we want to express this. But our experience of existence falls outside of everything we were taught to believe growing up, including atheism. Our inherent experience of our own existence does not fit in with the way we were raised to believe things. And one of the things we've been thinking about lately is it truly does not matter if someone who is never going to interact with spirits anyway believes they're real or not. It does not matter if an atheist or whatever thinks spirits are real, because they're never going to have to interact with them. They're never gonna, like, not necessarily, like, it doesn't affect them, right? Whereas someone like me, who is having full-on possession symptoms, I had to accept at some point, through some lens, to explain my symptoms. And now, of course, I understand that what I was experiencing is DID. But at the time, I didn't know that. I just felt like I was being satanically possessed. And, it doesn't really matter if it's real or not, if you're living with it, if you can feel it, if you're interacting with it, and if it's affecting you every single day, right? Can you imagine what it feels like to be haunted by what you know or feel like is an angel every single fucking day? Like, can you imagine, like, how frustrating that is? And, like, it's really complicated, right? So, like, it doesn't matter if an atheist thinks these things are real or not, because they don't have to live with it. They don't have to accept it. They don't have to understand it. Whereas in my case, I had to do something, because no amount of medicine or medical intervention or anything else is going to take these things away from me. And another thing, even if there was some miraculous cure for my disabilities, whether that be DID or my autism, I wouldn't take that cure, because I see these disabilities as an inherent part of my identity. And I think it's better to accept my experiences and to accept what I'm going through, rather than to try and separate and cut off a piece of my brain, like I tried for the first 20 years when I was being influenced by all of these things that didn't give a shit about me, that just wanted to use me. And so it's like, yeah, I believe in spirits because I have to live with them every day. And whether I'm seeing them through the psychological perspective of these are separate parts of my brain that have their own identities, or whether I'm listening to my spirits who tell me they're spirits and tell me they're angels and tell me all this shit, and I believe that because I live with them every day, doesn't really matter because either way I'm living with them. And the people, I grew up around, they don't believe in any of this shit. They don't think it's real, right? And I was abused by a lot of those same adults when I was a child. And so it's like, I don't have the luxury of normalcy. I don't get that choice, right? And even if I had that choice now, I wouldn't take it because for 20 years, I wanted more than anything in this world to be normal. But I can't be. I can't be normal. And I don't want to be either anymore because normal people are fucking assholes. They're a lot worse than the Satans I have to live with. And, yeah, I guess I just wanted to share that because it was something we needed to get off our mind.